Hi everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Nora Churchefchi and I run an interior design practice. And today I am going to talk to you about those classic things, the things that will never go out of trend. Neutral colors. Now everybody that knows our interior design style knows that we love a neutral, but there is a reasoning behind this. It isn't just easy and soft on the eye. It is a natural palette that you can use, and neutrals of course aren't just one color. There are a whole range of neutrals. You've got shades of grays, shades of creams, shades of taupes, shades of white. And actually, there is so much range in there that you can play with that there's enough to create real beauty and real energy and balance. So I think using a neutral is a great way to start with a color palette. You can, of course, then add lots of different pops of color and accents alongside a neutral, but having that base always gives you the ability to change up whatever the accent color is. It gives you the ability to change in and use other different neutral fabrics within your neutral scheme. So if you keep it layered as neutrals, then actually you can really change up your scheme many times without it being very noticeable. It's much more difficult to have, I don't know, a bright orange sofa in a room and then decide to change a whole color scheme, because everything in the room will be really working hard to work with that orange sofa. Not that I don't love an orange sofa, but if you have a cream, taupe or gray sofa and then you decide to go off and get yourself, I don't know, cream white armchairs and maybe next year change them to brown, you've got much more scope there to actually move within your design. And I think for me, as somebody that does like to look and change my design and, you know, sometimes play around with different layers and different textures and not always have the same look, a neutral base really gives me that sort of area to play. The last thing I would say about having lots of large items in the room which have lots of vibrant color is, you know, they're great, I think, when you are sort of visiting somewhere, whether it's a cafe or a hotel or a restaurant. You know, it's kind of wacky and it's cool and it's fun and luxurious, but actually having to live with that very bold color every single day, it may not be what you want to experience in your everyday life. And I mean every single day for many years to come. So, you know, do think about that. And that may not be the case. You may be somebody that really loves one bold particular color. I mean, I love a bold blue, and I know I can live with a bold blue for many years and never get bored. So, you know, it's more about knowing what you like, but definitely a neutral color palette helps with keeping everything classic and giving the look longevity. If you're unsure about how to bring neutrals together, and I think it is a more difficult concept, you know, when you're starting out, then I think the first thing to do is put down a couple of neutrals that you might like. So a gray fabric, a taupe fabric, a cream fabric, a really white fabric, and decide, you know, which route do you want your base color to be. So from my perspective, you know, for me, it might be a taupe. And so I then might say, okay, well, I still want to use all of those other colors, but you know, perhaps in my living room, the base is going to be a taupe color, and therefore I'm going to look at other colors that work really well with that taupe. And they can be other neutrals. So you can use different shades of cream with the taupe. You can actually play around with different shades of the taupe itself. And then you can use a deeper brown color. You can use a burgundy, a sort of a darker burgundy or a dark orange, burnt orange color that I think works really nicely with a taupe. And you can use those as your accent colors, and you start to sort of build up this mini presentation of fabrics, and then you start to really get a feel for the space. And you may actually find that that takes you down another road, and actually you don't really want to go for the taupe that you thought you did. But if the taupe color or if the base color is your determining factor, it then makes everything else very easy to choose around that. And if you don't want an actual bold accent color and you just want to layer with a neutral, and you quite like a gray and a white and a cream and a taupe, then, you know, you can use all of those colors, some in the same space, and some, if, you know, like for example, sometimes your gray might fight with your taupe. If they are in relatively similar spaces, just make sure they're enough a distance apart that, you know, you're not feeling that one is fighting with the other. And you can layer, I'll say the word layer again with neutrals, because I think some people do find that quite complicated. It is not. about, just layering up different fabrics. It's actually looking at your base color, the fabric that you like, picking a fabric that you really love, and then saying, okay, well, this is my main fabric for, I always use the sofa as an example because it's such a wide area with such a lot of fabric on it. So if you've chosen your sofa fabric, which I always think is half the battle, then, you can look at another texture or another finish for a different chair, for a different cushion. You can mix in linens with cottons, suedes with velvets. You can do so much within there and just change up the texture. So you're staying within that same layering of that one tonal color, but actually by changing the materials, you're really adding some vibrancy and interest into the space. I am a big fan of adding a natural element into every space that you are living in. I think, ultimately we are at our very essence part of nature. And I think becoming closer to nature definitely gives us more ease and more comfort. And I'm sure it's psychological because I definitely feel much more relaxed when I'm around lots of plants or even the color green sometimes. And so I think you can add in a natural element either by, yes, you can, purchase a beautiful faux tree. Faux olive trees at the moment are becoming very popular, but, you can also add in elements of nature through other ways. You can have a focus towards the windows. If the windows are looking out to some greenery, you can make that a focus. You can add in branches if you're not really a big floral person, and that sort of gives you the feel of nature and the outdoors. You can, buy yourself a bunch of flowers if you love fresh flowers, as I obviously do. And, that can just give you a sense of freshness. And I love the way flowers actually make me feel. So I really make sure that there is one space, which is my kitchen, which I always try to have flowers in. But there are other ways of adding in nature without physically bringing in florals, trees, branches, etc. And you can do it by just adding a color in. So, from my perspective, blues and greens are a lovely way to sort of give a very subtle nod to nature. And we've done that definitely in some of our rooms upstairs. It definitely has a very calming, relaxing effect. You can find beautiful wallpapers that give you a sense of nature. So you can either choose a blue plain wallpaper, a light blue or a light green, I would suggest. But you can also have a wallpaper with florals embedded in the design. And so I think there are so many ways today in which you can really bring nature inside. And if you can do that in every space, then I think, it does really give you a relaxing feel. And I think it's something that will never go out of style. It's a complete classic, making us feel more at one with nature is very, very important. And I think if you do have big windows and you do have the luxury of having some really elegant views outside your windows, then, try and make those windows a focus within that space. And that in itself is bringing that outside in. The next classic one for me is sticking to classic furniture shapes. Now, I say this with a pinch of salt, and I really only here mean your bigger pieces. So, I think I've seen so many times the big item in the room, which, tends to be or can be the more costly item, being an item that clearly that person has bought at a certain period where that particular, and it's always the sofa in my opinion, that particular sofa is very trendy, and I'm going to say it. I have seen many a Chesterfield in my time that for me doesn't really belong in a living room unless, you're going off to do a particular Soho House look, or it's a particular sort of, beautiful English library look, and then it works. I think, in a normal living room, a brown leather Chesterfield sofa is just a no-no. And I have seen it a few times, and it's made me feel very bad because I've thought, well, you clearly bought it when it was relevant for that day and period. And then, of course, there are the grey options also. But it does go out of trend very, very quickly. And, the problem with that, of course, is it is not sustainable and you're not able to keep it really for a long time. So it's a shame, or if you do keep it for a long time, I think you do start to get bored of it. That doesn't mean if you've got a Chesterfield sofa in your living room, you should throw it away. I'm just saying, I think it's probably more of a trend buy. And so what I would say stays in trend is really classic shapes for sofas. I think we are doing a video, in fact, on different shapes for sofas, so that's one to look out for. But you know, if you want a change and you're not really interested in the box square shape or, you know, a typical curve, then you can make slight changes to the standard shape. You know, you can have a bigger swoop or a softer swoop of an arm if you don't like the very straight edged arm. But I think, you know, try to keep it as close to being a classic as possible, because, you know, the worst thing is to get bored of any item of furniture, and furniture is expensive no matter where you buy it from. You know, even cheap furniture these days is expensive. So, you know, try just to keep mindful that you want a sofa to really give you longevity, but all items of furniture. And so, you know, I have also chosen items of furniture that I've bought because I particularly adored them and couldn't do without them. But I have tried to really maintain a classic shape so that I don't ever feel the need to change anything. And I mean, we are now getting to the point where we actually do want to change our living room sofa, but I mean, I've had it for a good 10 years. And in fact, I'm finding it hard to let go of because I know it is such a good classic, easy shape. And so I think, you know, that's the other nice thing about having a classic piece, is that you're going to really not want to get rid of it and think twice before you do. The other thing I would say, and definitely if you're not a designer, is to try and stick to more classic cabinetry. Now, I know you're going to see the cabinets behind me and say, well, that doesn't look classic at all. And that's absolutely right. My kitchen actually isn't very classic. Although we've done a twist on the classic shaker style door, actually our doors, you know, that twist has become really quite Art Deco and has taken it a little bit out there. But you know, I've been doing this for a long time, so it's given me a long time to think about the things that I really love and I want to be around. And I also know that in my job, I'm likely to change things up more frequently. And so if I really didn't like something, I could find a way to change it because, you know, it's the business I'm in. But if you don't want to constantly change your cabinets and your joinery, then I would say, you know, pick something that is classic again. And I always love a shaker style door. I think it's a timeless design. The really great thing about a shaker style is you can get it made incredibly reasonably for you, and you can buy incredibly reasonable shaker style doors, but also you can have beautiful luxury shaker style doors made for you. And so there is this range in which you can play with. But also what I find really interesting about classic cabinetry is the slightest things can then dress it up. So, you know, you can use more interesting handles, or, you know, something more classic, something more modern, something more contemporary, depending on what you particularly like and your direction in terms of style. You can paint a cabinet, you know, any color you like. So that again veers it towards your more personal preference. So I think if you take something standard, you can, you know, make it more bespoke just by small details rather than trying to go for something that's completely unique that most likely in, you know, a few months, but hopefully a few years, you'll be bored of. I think for my final point on classic design, what I would say is thought behind design is so much more important than everything else you do. So if you're about to design a house or a room or a space or whatever it is, don't think about the way everything looks first. I know it's tempting, but actually the first thing you do is get yourself a book and a notebook and a pen and write down what you need out of that space, and, you know, try and think out of the box. So if it's a kitchen, yes, your top item might end up being cooking, but there are so many other things you do in a kitchen. Your kids might be doing their homework there. You might be hanging out, having a coffee with a friend. You may, you know, I don't know, want to sit and have little chats with your children or your friends. And there is a lot going on in a kitchen space, and definitely in my home. And that may not be the case for you. But in every area, you do need to really think out of the box and think, what else am I doing in this space? And even with the standard things that you're doing, so I go back to my kitchen example, ask yourself, everybody has a bin in their kitchen, but do I need one bin? Or could I do with 2? Has one bin always caused me issues in the past? So that actually this time around, it might be better to build in 2 so that I avoid being irritated every time, the bin gets full and I haven't got a spare space to put the other bin. There are things that you really need to think through, and that really should guide the way that you design each space. And if it does, you really will have not just a better design space, but really a happier home. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed and liked, please do. And I can't wait to see you again.